Hey pirate fans around the world, this is Cheung Tsai. From Kidnapped to Legend, The Treasure Cave. A kidnapped fisher boy becomes the right hand of the pirate queen, terrorizes the Pearl River Delta, surrenders without losing his spoils, and leaves behind a Hong Kong cave that still whispers of treasure. The story begins with a short promise. There is a real place, carved by wind and salt, where people still slip into the dark with flashlights and curiosity. There is a boy from a fishing family, seized at sea, who rose to command a fleet that frightened empires. There is a moment where a feared raider laid down his arms, took a title, and sailed on as an officer of the very state that once hunted him. And there is a cave said to hide silver, jade, and stories that has never yielded a single confirmed coin. Tonight's journey separates what can be documented from what refuses to be pinned down without losing the mystery that makes the legend glow. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy and want to fall asleep with pirate stories whenever you want. Now, the cave. Imagine the island of Cheung, just a boat ride from the dense skyline of Hong Kong, where neon and glass give way to granite and scrub. The sea presses against the rocks with the steady rhythm of breathing. On one side of the island sits a jumble of boulders that looks at first glance like a natural puzzle, slabs tilted and stacked by time. In the gaps is a mouth, low and narrow, often reached by a simple path and a short climb. Visitors bend their heads, feel granite brush their shoulders, and step into a cool, echoing silence. The cave is not a cathedral, it is a zipper of stone, a dark seam that forces single file. Shoes scrape. A hand slides across damp rock that feels older than memory. It smells like the ocean hidden under the earth, salt and stone, and a hint of iron. Locals call it Cheung Tsai Cave. School groups shuffle through it at midday. Night hikers inch through with phone lights that paint the walls in moving white. Guides point toward crevices and say, with a smile, that chests once slid into those shadows. The tale says a pirate made this his secret locker, a place to keep the cut of prize money that belonged to a captain and his closest circle. The tale also says that storms drove him here, that patrols chased him here, that luck itself crouched here in the dark. Quick fact: no official survey has found confirmed pirate treasure in this cave. Metal detectors have clicked and hummed. Eyes have scanned every cramped corner. Plenty of photos, plenty of rumors, but no inventory of bars or coins stamped with an authority that proves ownership. That absence does not deflate the place, it charges it. The cave becomes a character, not a vault but a witness. Its power is simple. A person can stand inside it and think realistically that someone once hid here in fear or cunning, listening to waves and footsteps above. That feeling is wealth of a different kind. Heads up on this: caves like this endure in the memory because they solve two problems at once. They are easy to defend and easy to forget. A small entrance forces pursuers to enter in a line. The dark turns even familiar ground into confusion. And when the coast is clear, the sea retakes the story. Rain washes away footprints. Wind polishes stone like an eraser. If a chest ever sat here, damp air would have worked on the iron, the hinges, the nails. Wood swells, leather cracks, coins slip where fingers cannot. In short, a sea cave is a reliable hiding place in the moment and a poor archive in the long run. With the cave's breath in mind, step back in time to the late 18th century along the South China coast. Fishing villages ring coves like beads on a rope. Families live by seasons and tides. A teenager named Cheung, born into that routine, goes out with relatives to haul nets and check lines. The water is a road, and on that road appears a ship that does not belong. The ship closes distance without hurry. Men jump aboard. The rules of this encounter are older than the village. Stronger takes weaker. Sailors become cargo. The boy vanishes into the wake. He emerges with a new life. The captor is no lone raider, but a leader within a large confederation of pirate fleets that fly colored flags like military banners. The man at the top is Zheng Yi, known in some records as Ching Yat, who commands the Red Flag Fleet. Within months, the boy proves steady and quick. He learns how to coil a line, cut a sail loose in a squall, and read the moods of officers. He learns not only how to plunder, but how to organize people and tide time. Soon he is drawn into the family circle, effectively adopted, and given a new name by which the underworld will know him. Cheung Po Tsai, literally Cheung Po the Kid. Here another figure steps forward. Qing Shi, Jing Yi's wife, a woman with sharp intelligence and an even sharper sense of politics. She will one day be called the Pirate Queen for good reason. She sees in Cheung Po Tsai not just a pair of strong hands, but a mind that can keep a fleet in order. Remember this triangle: Jing Yi, Qing Shi, and Cheung Po Tsai, because power at sea always has a family face. In cabins and on decks, alliances are cemented not only by contracts but by meals, ceremonies, shared danger and secrets. The adoption binds the boy to the command, but so does the subtle training that Qing Shi provides. How to read a port official's eyes, how to hold silence until the other side of a negotiation breaks it, how to keep men loyal without wasting coin or blood. Now zoom out. The Red Flag Fleet is not a handful of boats. It is a mobile city on water. Hundreds of junks, with shallow drafts that slip up estuaries and around sandbars, sail in squadrons. Flags shot up the masts. Signal formations and orders. Scouts ride the wind ahead. Rear guards hang back to pounce on pursuers. At the beginning of the 19th century, South China's coastline is a maze of inlets and river mouths, like the Pearl River Delta, where channels shift with silt and storms. To the untrained, it is confusion. To locals and seasoned crews, it is home turf. Geography does half the work in every engagement. The fleet is not only about combat, it runs an economy. In one town, shopkeepers pay for protection. In another, crews escort merchant junks past reefs and officials in exchange for a fixed cut. Some days look like war, other days like logistics. A ledger lives under the deckboards alongside muskets. Sailors know their shares, the system that distributes plunder by an agreed formula. Quartermasters track food and fresh water, salt fish and rice, oil for lamps, even the small luxuries that keep morale high. Dried fruit, tea bricks, tobacco. A ship that feeds and pays its people on time never lacks for volunteers. The code aboard is strict, and that is why the fleet works. No one steals from the communal store. Assaults inside the crew are punished harshly. Captains who keep prizes off the ledger risk more than a reprimand. The logic is simple. Order is profit. A chaotic pirate band snags quick loot and then dissolves into quarrel. An ordered fleet collects tribute like taxes and sales, year after year. That order gives the Red Flag Fleet its reach. On clear days, villagers see lines of sails like a moving wall, and understand that the wall can become a net. Cheung Po Tsai rises in this system because he accepts discipline and shows nerve in action. Command is not given to the loudest or the cruelest. It is given to those who can keep men alive and the books balanced. He learns to place fast junks on the wings of a formation like hawks, to fold squadrons around an enemy and open them again without collision. He learns the patient art of blockade, how to sit beyond the horizon from a port until no cargo moves without paying a price. He speaks to fishermen in their own idiom and hears news before it becomes a report. He becomes the officer one turns to when conditions change and the plan must change with them. Then the sea changes, as it always does. Zheng Yi dies. Accounts vary on the exact circumstances, and a vacuum opens that would crack most confederations. Qing Shi steps into that vacuum with force and clarity. She consolidates power, unifies the flag squadrons, and ensures that the Red Flag Fleet still answers to one mind. In this transition, Cheung and Tsai formalize an alliance that is as much strategic as personal. She trusts him, elevates him, and ties him to the top. The fleet continues, as if a strong wind filled its sails. In 1809, pressure increases. Coastal officials coordinate a series of campaigns meant to squeeze the pirate confederations by cutting off food, harbors, and safe channels. The Portuguese established in Macau enter the picture as allies of the Qing in coastal defense. Their small maneuverable vessels armed with cannon and crews used to tight harbor work complicate the fleet's habits. Tsai adjusts. He is not a gambler, he is a reader of skies and tides. When a head-on fight promises a bad exchange, he disperses the squadrons like a handful of birds. When authority loosens its grip, he converges again, traps a convoy, and takes what he wants with minimal drama. The conflict grows sharp around Lantau Island, and up toward the straits known to foreigners as the Bogue and to locals as the Tiger's Mouth, where the Pearl River narrows toward forts and customs posts. Here, currents run like mussels under the water. Here, winds bounce between hills and confuse sails. Cheung Tsai knows the rips and swirls and uses them. One account describes a day when government boats thought they had him pinned near reefs, only to find that the reefs worked both ways. The tide set their own craft against rock while his slipped sideways out of reach. It is not magic, it is pilotage mastery of the boat in its particular water. Step by step, the net tightens. The cost of keeping the fleet supplied rises. The number of ports that will wink and say nothing shrinks. Cheung understands politics as well as finance. She measures risk and return, and begins to consider a path that few pirates could imagine: an organized surrender on favorable terms. The logic is cold and brilliant. If the fleet is broken piecemeal, men die, and wealth scatters. If the fleet surrenders intact, men live, and wealth can be negotiated. Control to the last moment is the key. Ambience 10. Cheung Tsai steers toward that outcome. He goes to the table not as a fugitive, but as a power broker. The terms are stark, and, to modern ears, surprising. Ships, cannon, and arms are surrendered in great number. In return, officers and crews receive amnesty. Key leaders, including Cheung Tsai, receive ranks and positions within the Qing naval structure. The state trades humiliation today for stability tomorrow. The pirates trade outlaw freedom for official status, and crucially, for the chance to keep private wealth that would otherwise vanish in defeat. It is a bargain that turns enemies into employees. The day of surrender itself is a theater of management. Hundreds of men, used to loose discipline between raids but tight discipline in action, now must trust that the promise made will be kept. Cheung, the architect, stands at the center of this calm. Cheung Tsai ensures that squadrons line up, turn over their arms, and do not break ranks. The enemy watches, and for once the enemy is simply the future. The fleet becomes a list of names on rolls, a pile of weapons, a scattering of hulls stripped of flags. The sea, indifferent, flexes under everything as always. What happened next explains why the name lasts. Cheung Tsai does not disappear into a city with a purse. He takes the rank offered. He serves as a colonel in the Qing naval forces, tasked with coastal defense and anti-piracy patrols. The paradox is rich but not unique. The best hunter of pirates is often an ex-pirate who knows every inlet where a hull can hide at low tide, who knows how a captain thinks at dawn with a headwind, who can decode the signals sent from beach to boat with a lantern under a cloth. He becomes a man in uniform who speaks two languages at once, the crisp phrasing of authority and the soft dialect of the coast. While he sails for the state, the cave back on Cheung keeps gathering stories. Locals point to it as a place that belonged to him in a personal way, as a hideaway, a stash point, or simply a comforting hole in the rock where a man could sleep without fear of surprise from three sides. Over time, other islands, Lama Tapmon, and more, gain caves that take his name too. The multiplication of caves fits a pattern seen all over the world. A single famous figure serves as a hook on which communities hang their own local spaces. A cave is more memorable when it belongs to a legend. If two villages both claim his cave, both gain attention, visitors, and pride. Here is a careful note. The absence of confirmed treasure does not mean the absence of hidden stores in the past. The sea erases. Iron rusts into red dust. Wood goes soft and rots. Cloth turns to nothing in the damp. Even coins can slip into cracks that fingers cannot reach. And once a storm shifts stones, the map in memory no longer matches the ground. Sea caves, while good for a short-term stash, are poor places to keep anything for decades. If a captain were truly planning for a long horizon, he would bury chests above the tide line under stable ground, mark the spot with a private code, and tell almost no one. A cave is a practical answer to a sudden need, not a banker's vault. Quick fact: Hong Kong's modern rules also matter. Digging into heritage sites or chipping rock in protected areas draws fines and worse. That legal boundary keeps the cave as a story space rather than a dig site. School children can go home saying, "He hid treasure here," and that line can live on without anyone tearing up the place. Back to the fleet's inner life for a moment. Because the code and the food on the table tell as much about power as any battle. Crews eat simple fare: rice, dried fish, pickled vegetables, supplemented by whatever can be bought or taken in a port. Fresh water is a constant concern. Barrels must be kept clean. Stale water sickens men and slows the ship as perfectly as headwinds. Shares of plunder are apportioned by rank, with incentives for those who risk more. It is not an equal system. It is an efficient one. A young deckhand sees a ladder to climb, if he survives, and keeps to the code. Punishments are severe but predictable. This predictability, more than swordplay, makes a pirate navy function. The code also governs interactions with civilians. Some communities are treated gently in return for quiet cooperation. Others are punished as examples when they do not pay or when they betray a patrol's position. Reputation becomes another weapon. Word spreads faster than sails in this coastline. A town 50 miles away will hear of a beating in noon detail by dusk. Cheung Tsai understands this and uses it sparingly. His aim is not to burn the shore, it is to keep it paying. When violence comes, it is workmanlike. The image of piracy in painting and film favors fire at night and panic. The reality, as often as not, is closer to quiet theft. With a timetable, a convoy is shadowed at distance until wind drops. Then the fast junks lean in. Cannons set low, grapples ready but not always used. Captains shout across water the way office clerks call across a counter, "Heave to yield cargo." Shots are fired only when someone breaks the script. If a fight becomes necessary, it is short and aimed at breaking will, not bodies. Time is money even at sea. Now, because the story must face the big fights that filled reports, return to those narrow waters near the forts. Portuguese gunboats and king junks move together like chess pieces from two sets on the same board. The red flag fleet tries a feint, a sudden pivot toward what looks like open water, but the wind shifts. A channel that was navigable at high tide becomes a set of teeth at low tide. Cheung Tsai, standing at the stern with a hand on the tiller and one eye on a cliff face that marks where the good water runs, changes orders fast. He does not cling to plan A. He zigzags between sand heads in a pattern his men learned last season while helping smugglers. The pursuit breaks formation, and that is enough. Small victories like this, escapes that look graceful from the hilltop and messy up close, add up. They buy months, but pressure increases all the same. The amnesty of 1810 solves the pressure by converting enemies to colleagues, at least on paper. Cheung Tsai's post-surrender life is not romantic, but it is effective. He supervises patrols that run from headland to headland. He gives practical advice about where to build small stations and where to plant a flag, just to be seen. He suggests which fishermen to cultivate as informants, with a few coins, and which to leave alone. He identifies patterns, the kind of midday sailing that hints at smuggling, the kind of unusual lantern signal that means a lookout is doing more than warning about rocks. It is worth pausing to see him through the eyes of a village after the amnesty. Men who once whispered his name now nod to a naval officer who does not swagger. He buys supplies without bargaining, to the last copper. He moves with small escorts, not an army. Children hear old men say, in voices equal parts caution and pride, he used to command the red flags. The name becomes two things at once. A warning in stories told to keep teenagers from risky dreams, and a comfortable legend that tourism will one day print on brochures. And that cave, still there, still tight, still cool, grows as a magnet because it is the rare place where the past is not abstract. The alleyways of old harbor towns have been rebuilt and paved. Flags and sails have been replaced by neon forts have become viewpoints with parking. But the cave, stubborn and small, shrugs off centuries with the same granite shoulders. A person steps inside and feels what the boy Cheung Tsai might have felt the first time he had to hide. Heart loud in the ears, breath held, listening for boots on rock. The wider politics of the coast are part of the story too. Canton, a giant of trade, funnels wealth toward and away from the sea. Macau sits nearby like an old coin with a new shine, with Europeans bargaining at tables and priests ringing bells, with captains speaking a mix of tongues that make deals happen. Each port has its own rhythm and its own tolerance for shadow commerce. In some places, officials look the other way because families depend on the extra money. In other places, a crackdown is the show that keeps a superior in the capital happy. Cheung Tsai navigates these human tides as precisely as he navigates sandbars. The economics of piracy in this arc of the world reward coordination. One boat can harass, 100 can govern. When the Red Flag Fleet was at its height, it effectively charged a tax on movement that the official state could not always enforce. That is one reason the amnesty was attractive to the state. It converts an unofficial system into a semi-official one, or at least dismantles its most visible arms. It is also a reason the legend sits so firmly. For a few years, people in dozens of towns lived under a second authority that proved more predictable than some on land. Predictability, again, is the secret. When people know what the rule is, they can survive under it. For those curious about daily life at sea, a short tour helps. At dawn, the cook fires a small stove if the sea is easy. Thin porridge is served, and men check lines and sails. The captain confers with lieutenants, weighing weather and news. Midday, if close to shore, a boat might go out to barter for fresh vegetables, or to carry messages. If an operation is planned, tools come out quietly, grapnels coiled, powder kept dry in oilskin, spare oars placed within reach. Evenings, if calm, sea repairs, a sail is mended by lantern, needles flashing, men talk about women, and home. And then, because those thoughts bruise, they talk about fish and cards, and jokes that survive in every language. There is boredom that stretches like the horizon. There is fear that arrives without knocking. There is camaraderie that tastes like rice after a long watch. After the amnesty, Cheung Tsai's years are fewer than one might expect. He dies at sea around 1822, not in battle, but as a sailor whose life, from beginning to end, was tied to water. The details of his death are quiet in the record, which fits the way he worked. Efficient, untheatrical, aware that the sea is always louder than any man's name. The treasure question refuses to die, because it asks something ordinary hearts love to ask. Did cunning back then leave a gift for someone lucky now? The answer stays in two parts. First, there is no verified catalog of his hoard taken from the cave on Chongqiao. Second, caches at sea are rarely permanent. If a fortune was hidden, It would likely have been moved or destroyed by the elements long before today's lights touched the walls. The smarter bet is that movable wealth, silver, jade, silk, moved ashore to trusted hands or vanished into the currents of trade. But the cave keeps faith with the hope that a corner was missed, and so visitors duck their heads and press on. Sometimes, in telling his story, people forget the two others who shaped it decisively. Zheng Yi, whose confederation gave form to the boy's rise, and Qing Shi, whose political acumen kept that form from collapsing when death came. Their partnership with Cheng Po Tsai is the armature beneath the legend. It explains why his climb was not simply luck, and why the surrender was not a collapse, but a controlled landing. It also highlights that Tsai-born empires, like all empires, are built on relationships. Orders mean little without trust. Trust means little without reward, and reward means little without someone to manage the account book. As for the big powers, the Portuguese in Macau, the Qing officials in Canton, the international traders gliding in and out of the estuary, their role adds color and tension, but does not remove the local truth. The coast belongs to those who can read it. Cheung Po Tsai read it better than most. That literacy of tide and proverb, of channel and rumor, is the thread that runs through his life from abduction to rank. It is why a small cave retains his name with confidence, even if no coin in it can be pinned to his hand. To close this first half of the night's long watch with a final image before continuing, picture the cave at dusk. The sea is gray silk. The rock is warm from the day and cool inside. A group of friends stands at the entrance hesitating. One goes first. A phone light clicks on, not to hunt treasure, but to measure depth. Behind them on the path, a child asks if pirates still use caves. An older voice answers softly that pirates find new caves all the time, and they are not always made of stone. The group disappears inside, and the cave, as it always has, makes them smaller and braver at once. The group emerges from the cave with laughter low and steady, and the shoreline begins to glow with the kind of evening light that makes every edge gentle. The legend is not a roaring storm. It is the tide that keeps returning, bringing the same questions with a new curl of foam each time. In the years when Cheung Po Tsai climbed from captive to commander, that tide carried more than stories. It carried rice and silk and silver, orders sealed with red wax, and rumors that moved faster than sails. His name traveled along that water as a shorthand for a method: stay organized, read the coast, keep fear as a tool rather than a performance. Quick fact, useful for anyone hearing the name for the first time. The word Tsai functions like the kid, a familiar diminutive pinned to a boy who grew into rank with unusual speed. Cheung Po Tsai, Cheung Po the kid, remained the name even when the boy's shoulders filled out and his decisions shaped fleets. That label preserves the memory of the abduction that started everything. It also preserves the sense that a child of fishermen can, under the right wind and under stern teachers, learn to steer a city of sails. By the time the Red Flag Fleet hit its peak, its routines looked almost civic. Squadrons kept to assigned stretches of water, the way patrols keep to districts. Coastal towns learned that a timely payment was cheaper than a skirmish. Crews aboard the junks moved between calm and intensity like workers on any long shift. In the morning, the smell of cooking rice drifted over planks, rubbed smooth by bare feet. At noon, the slap of water against hulls mixed with the rattle of rigging. In the evening, low speech hummed under lantern light as torn canvas was stitched into strength. A code on paper, or at least a memorized set of rules, kept order. No violence within the crew, no theft from the common store, strict shares for plunder and wages, and a duty to protect those who paid for protection. Violations drew punishments that were swift and known in advance. That predictability turned fear into a fence rather than a fire. When confrontation came, it tended to follow a few patterns. If a convoy hugged the coast, fast junks appeared where reefs gave them advantage, and deeper draft escorts dared not chase. If government boats pressed hard, the fleet scattered into shoals and creeks, trusting pilots who could read water by color and surface. The battles that made it into reports, especially the clashes around Lantau and the channels leading toward the forts at the river mouth, were the rare moments when both sides agreed to test nerve in the open. There, cannon spoke across short distances, smoke blew into the faces of men who had to guess friend from foe by the tilt of a sail, and blasts echoed off cliffs like a drumhead struck from both sides. The geography at the Tiger's Mouth favored those who knew every twist. The Pearl River, squeezing between points and sandheads, made trap and escape at once. Cheung Tsai's talent lay in turning that double nature into a pattern. Advance until the pursuer thinks the corner is tight, then slip along a line of deeper water that only locals would trust. Reform on the far side, and be gone before the second volley. Reports from officials speak of frustration more than fury. It is one thing to be beaten in a fair fight. It is another to feel a hand on the sleeve and then watch without understanding how the sleeve come loose while the thief walks away whistling. Heads up on this. The power of the fleet rested less on a single masterstroke than on hundreds of small, conservative choices that preserved crews and boats. It is often tempting, in retelling, to hunt for a decisive hour. The reality that emerges in the pattern is a captain who knew when not to fight, who preferred a predictable payment to a risky raid, and who treated victory as a matter of arithmetic. Keep more sailors alive this month than last. Keep more hulls floating than burning. Keep food and fresh water moving to the places that need them. That quiet math made the 1810 turn possible. The surrender, described in accounts from both sides, unfolded as a planned ceremony rather than a cornered panic. The site, remembered as Furongxia by chroniclers, became a stage on which two practicalities met. On one side stood officials who wanted the coastline calm enough for trade and taxes to flow. On the other stood leaders who wanted their men to live and their property to remain private. The agreement they made reflected those wants more than any high ideal. Crews came ashore in rank order, set down arms, and registered under their own names. Hulls were counted. Cannons were stacked. The amnesty papers did not erase the past. They gave it a lid and a date. To many observers, the strangest clause was the one that allowed certain leaders, including Cheung Tsai, to keep wealth. Yet to those leaders, the clause was the hinge. Without it, there would have been no surrender, only a lingering series of fights that cost the state more than it could bear. From that day forward, the man whose planning had built revenue without chaos applied the same habits to a different flag. Coastal defense is rarely glamorous. It is a grind of patrols, sightings, false alarms, and slow education, teaching ordinary crews to look at a channel and see the one place where a fast boat could cut through at low tide, teaching officers in shore stations to treat fishermen as weather vanes that turn toward trouble before smoke appears. Cheung Tsai's presence in that apparatus shortened the learning curve by years. He recognized style at a distance, the way a rudder bites when a helmsman plans to feint, the swagger of a junk that has tasted easy pickings for too long, the silence in a village that signals a debt unpaid to someone nobody wants to name. An ex-outlaw in uniform does not guess, he remembers. At sea, reputation lingers like a wake. Even in service to the state, the old name carried a weight that smoothed conversations and shaped choices. A merchant captain, hearing that a certain officer was aboard the patrol boat in the harbor, might take care to file paperwork and to signal clearly at night. A young would-be pirate, learning that the man hunting the coast had once commanded the red flag, might decide that this is a bad season to risk a first raid. That ambient pressure spared lives on both sides. It also meant that the former boy from a fishing family, known as the Kid, aged into a figure whose quiet prevented more violence than any single clash. Return now to the caves that keep the story breathing. The one on Qingqiao is the best known because it is the most accessible and because the island's life naturally pours visitors past its path. Steps cut in rock lead down a narrow slot runs between boulders, where the sea, in storms, throws foam like a warning flag. Inside, the path turns once, squeezes twice, and opens into a slightly larger pocket, where, if a man huddled with a bundle wrapped in oilskin, he could wait out the search above. Other caves on Lama, on Tap Mun, on lesser-known islets wear the same name like cousins. Their shapes vary. Some are mere overhangs, scored by generations of salt. Others twist deeper, dark as a pocket. Whether or not the historical man ever crossed their thresholds, the communities that named them made a choice to weave themselves into the larger cloth. The name connects their rocks to a wider memory. The idea of treasure is, of course, a magnet, guided by more than metal. In physical terms, sea caves are poor vaults. Moisture eats iron and swells wood. Sand moves like a sly hand that steals without being seen. If anything was hidden, it would have been with a short-term plan. Wait a week, wait a month, then move at night with trusted hands in a small boat. Longer-term security would have required a different tactic. Burial above the high water mark, underground that would not be flooded, marked by a private sign only the inner circle could read. The cave then is best understood not as a bank but as a panic room and a postal drop, a place to keep items in motion safe until the next link in the chain came to collect. Modern hunts tend to confirm the logic. A metal detector will sing at a dropped nail, a bottle cap, a scrap of iron from a lantern hinge, and if the day is unusually generous, at a coin shed by a tourist's pocket. Decades later, none of that amounts to a ledger entry that says, "Captain's share delivered to this hollow on such a date." Researchers who walk in with notebooks find something else that is solid. The geometry of concealment, the tight turns and the way sound behaves, how footsteps above reveal their number, how voices carry explain why someone on the run would choose this cavity and not that one. That explanation, though less flashy than a chest, is truer to the work of piracy. Piracy is logistics under pressure. Conservation rules, put in place to keep the coastline from being chewed into souvenirs, create a kind of truce. The cave remains a place that families can explore without fearing that it will be chiseled into gravel by the next fad. That stability lets the legend breathe without being strangled by overenthusiasm. Guides can continue to say, "He hid here," and the sentence does no harm, because it binds the present to the past without a drill or a shovel. The local economy benefits from the story. The rock remains itself. There is another economy to describe, one that worked hand in glove with the fleet's code. The Pearl River Delta, with Canton as its heart, beat wealth through arteries that stretched inland and outward to the world. Smugglers ran along those arteries like white blood cells dodging a fever. Monsoon winds set seasons, the southwesterlies bringing ships up from the straits, the northeasterlies sending them down. In the gap between state capacity and commerce's appetite, Cheung Tsai's organization offered a service. For a fee, a boat could move with less risk. For a larger fee, a set of boats could move under escort that discouraged opportunists. Resistance, the kind of showy raid that left cannon smoke as a souvenir, was a last resort because it disrupted business. Maps of the period, when compared with the tacit maps in sailors' skulls, show the difference between paper and practice. Paper maps sketch channels that shift. Practice remembers where a certain sandbar always catches a keel on the second day after a storm. Paper maps label islands. Practice remembers which side of an island has a cove that loses its chop first in an incoming tide, allowing a launch to beach quietly. Cheung Tsai's rise rests on that second kind of map. The men under him followed orders because the orders matched the world, not because the ink looked official. In all of this, the partnership with Qingxi holds focus. After Jingyi's death, many expected the fleet to fracture. Leaders competing, crews choosing favorites, treasure bleeding away through 100 small cracks. Instead, Qingxi consolidated command with deliberate moves. She brought squadrons to heal. She adjusted the code to hold men in check. She recognized that Cheung Tsai's respect among the rank and file could be harnessed without letting it rival her own authority. Their marriage, recorded in accounts with varying levels of detail, served both a private and a public purpose. It signaled continuity and bound two centers of gravity into one orbit. With that arrangement in place, the Confederation could negotiate as a single actor in 18. The surrender was not a leader's whim. It was the culmination of a managed transition. Ports close to the story, Canton and Macau, in particular, played roles that were more theater than legend, but still instructive. Canton, with its foreign hongs and licensed trade, was a room where rules were made like furniture, heavy, practical, and meant to last, but often dragged around in a hurry when company came. Macau, long a Portuguese enclave, offered a different stage: mission churches, tight lanes, and harbor craft that could be hired quickly for jobs that never made it into a book. The East India Company's presence in the region ensured that news had more than one destination. Dispatches crossed oceans with complaints about piratical depredations, and with praise when the coast calmed. In this traffic of papers and coins, Cheung Tsai became a line in ledgers and a worry in paragraphs that otherwise spoke of tea and insurance. A pause, now, to widen the lens across centuries. Legends last when they serve purposes. For many kinds of people, for children in a modern city, the cave is a rite of passage that costs nothing but a little courage and a bus ticket. For teachers, the story is a clear entry to talk about local geography, imperial politics, and the difference between a document and a rumor. For tourists, it is a photograph with a caption that will draw comments from friends. For the community, the name on the sign is part of a mosaic that tells the town who it has been and who it wants to be. Festivals, small exhibits, themed snacks, the ordinary machinery of local pride are softer than canon, but they are how memories fortify themselves in peacetime. As with any figure who lived at the intersection of myth and administration, the record of Cheung Tsai's life contains knots and clean runs. What is certain: a fisherman's son was seized. He rose fast inside the Red Flag Fleet. He participated in a structured surrender in 1810 that delivered amnesty and official rank. He served as a naval officer tasked with suppressing what he had once perfected. He died at sea around 8. What is debated: the exact contours of certain battles, especially where reports from opposing sides disagree, the amounts of wealth kept or moved, the nature and location of any caches that would qualify as treasure under a strict definition, the daily particulars of his later career. Some Portuguese dispatches inflate their achievements. Some king memos compress embarrassment into passive verbs. Later storytellers fill silence with details that fit the mood of a campfire better than the style of an archive. Myth checks fit easily within the tale, without dimming its light. Did he line a cave with chests? There is no proof, and the cave itself argues against long-term storage. Did he change sides because he was cornered? The pattern suggests something more careful. After years of making the coast obey a price list, he accepted a deal that kept lives and money intact. Was he a terror for the sake of terror? Testimony and behavior point to an organizer who treated violence as a tool to keep revenue flowing, not as sport. In the quiet places where the story catches breath, those distinctions make him more, not less, interesting. The blend of tenderness and toughness in the triangle he formed with Qingxi sits at the heart of the legend's staying power. People lean closer, generations later, because it reveals a truth that travels well beyond one coast. Power is private before it is public. A captain can hold a crew in line for a day. A pair of leaders who respect each other can hold a system in line for a decade. The interplay of their skills, her sharp political sense, his sure hand on water, meant that the fleet never felt leaderless, even in transition, and never felt purely predatory even at its most forceful. Order carried through to the amnesty. Order carried through to the patrols that followed. Consider how the legend ends at sea, not on land. He does not retire to a grand house with a signboard announcing his virtues. He is not executed in a square where children count lashes. He disappears into the same element that made and tested him. For storytellers, that ending does a clean job. The sea is the one witness that never betrays a confidence and never writes a boast. Those who want a curse can find it there. The sea keeps what it wants. Those who want a blessing can find it too. The sea returns every morning with light on its back, forgiving the previous day's maps. For the closing movement, the cave returns. Because every story that touches rock must end where footsteps begin. Today, a line of people waits politely at the entrance. Some sure-footed, some already laughing at how narrow it is. A teenager holds a parent's hand, part comfort, part habit. The first in line ducks and disappears into the cool. The last takes one lingering look at the glitter on the water through the gap between stone teeth. Inside, voices are low, not because of fear, but because rock encourages quiet. A name is spoken, Cheung Tsai, and the syllables do their ordinary work. They do not summon ghosts. They simply lay a thin line between past and present that anyone can follow without getting lost. There is the kidnapped boy. There is the adopted officer who learned to coordinate a moving city. There is the architect of a surrender that preserved lives and livelihoods. There is the uniformed colonel who knew every trick his prey would try. And there is the cave that, with or without coins, gives the legend a home address. If treasure is defined as a chest ready to be counted, then the cave is empty. If treasure is defined as a place where people can feel history press close to their shoulders and hear water breathe against stone, then the cave is full and always will be. The final judgment belongs to each listener. Some will say that mercy granted by the amnesty made his name endure, because it allowed the story to keep moving without a tragic cliff. Others will say fear earned in the years when sails ringed the horizon, cast a longer shadow, and that the cave feels charged because of nights when armed men crouched in its pocket of dark. Either way, the legend holds. It does not require thunder to keep attention. It requires instead exactly what it has: a believable boy, a disciplined fleet, a negotiated peace, and a piece of coastline where a person can step into cool air and imagine footsteps above.